Welcome to the Profiled Corner. In the last video of our router series, we looked at doing various different types of tasks with a router, such as putting an edge on a board, flush trimming, and also creating pockets in boards for dutchmen, similar to what I've got back here on the wall. You may not be able to see it way in the back, but I actually put dutchmen into the wall, and I'll give you a close-up of it. I used those dutchmen to patch knot holes that were in those boards, and I thought that would be a good use. I actually did that freehand using a router, and then I cut a patch to go into the freehand cut hole. Taking the Dutchman approach one step further, in addition to just creating pockets for Dutchmen, we can also create pockets for lettering. So we could create an engraved sign, for instance, if we have a template. I use Microsoft Word to produce a template for me for a sign. It's fairly simple to use Microsoft Word to create simple signs, and I just printed it out on 11 by 17 paper. I'll show you some screen captures of creating this fancy wording down at the bottom of the page. So this will become the template for our board. Now I've selected a board that we milled up in a previous video, in the Surfacing Four Sides video. This board has a lot of grain that goes in all sorts of different directions, and that could present problems for me when I go to route letters into the board, because I've got to look at the grain direction and try to figure out which way I need to route so that I don't have split out during the routing. I'll be using a 1/4-inch bit. It is a spiral bit from this set that I've shown in the past. I don't usually use 1/4-inch spiral bits for doing engraved signs. I normally use a 10-degree conical end mill bit. However, I could not find a good source for those bits to be able to tell you, go out and get one of these bits. I don't ever use the V-ing bits like other people use for doing signs. I don't like the look of these bits. I much prefer a flat bottom in the letters. It looks much more 3D-like. So anyway, I'll be putting this template onto the board, and I found some white carbon paper that I can use to transfer the letters onto the board just by tracing around the letters. And I'll do that on this board. Before I do that, however, I need to get a little bit of practice in doing lettering, because it has been a while since I last created an engraved sign. So I've got this project that I created. It's a push block. I created this in a previous video, and I still have not created the opening here. I said that I was going to use either a scroll saw or a drill press and a jigsaw to cut out this. But since we know how to use pocketing with a router, I can actually do that using a router. Another thing that accidentally got trimmed out of the previous video, I had mentioned that different size router bits require different speeds. The larger the diameter of the router bit, the slower that you need to turn the router RPM down to. Whiteside has a handy chart on the back of all their router bit packaging that tells you the speed to use for your router for any certain diameter bit. So for instance, up to 3/4 of an inch, you can run that at up to 24,000 RPM. Of course, if you've got some palm routers or trim routers that only turn at 30,000 RPM, it should be safe to run those bits that are up to 3/4 of an inch in diameter at 30,000 RPM if you don't have variable speed in the router. It says here that for 3/4 inch to 1.5 inch diameter bits, you can run those at up to 18,000 RPM. 1.5 to 2.25 diameter bits, you can run at up to 16,000 RPM. And bits between 2.25 inches and 3.5 inches, you need to slow down the router to 12,000 RPM. And preferably, if your router goes down to 10,000 RPM, you'd probably want to use that for a 3.5 inch diameter router bit. If your router does not support variable speed, there are controllers that, they're third-party controllers that give a router variable speed control by adjusting, I believe it's the voltage that's supplied to the router. That would probably end up reducing the amount of power that the router has, but that may be an option for you if you need to run a larger diameter router bit in your router. Okay, another thing that I should mention is that you need to make sure that the router is going to move smoothly across the board when you're routing it. So when we route across this, so we don't want any resistance from the base plate or the sub base on the router. And so what you can do is you can use some Johnson's paste wax on the base of the router. They've stopped making this particular type of wax a couple of years ago. Doing a little bit of research and looking at various reviews on the internet, I found that there's something called bowling alley wax by the BWC company that's sold on Amazon. This seems to work just as well as the Johnson's paste wax. At least in my little bit of experimentation with it, it does work. And I've already applied it to the bottom of my router. So the router should be nice and slippery on its bottom here. So we're ready to go, I believe. So I'm going to zoom the camera in so that you can see me routing out this pocket. And then I'll cut away the camera, and then I'll trace the profile of our sign onto the board that I have here in front of me, and then we'll get started with doing the cutting of that sign. Okay, I have attached the board to another sacrificial board, and I've got a router mat underneath it to hopefully hold it to keep it from shifting. I've got a straight line here and another straight line here, and a little tip to be able to route that line straightly is you take a ruler and a sharp utility knife and you just score along the line using the utility knife. And there's another straight line there. And what should happen is that as you're routing that, the wood should break away automatically right around where that line was cut, and then it'll be easier to make sure that the router is moving in a straight direction. We'll be using a similar approach with the sign that we create later on. But as I said, I need to get a little bit of practice. This black walnut is very straight grained compared with the wood for the sign. And so at least this will give me a feel for cutting in black walnut. Okay, let's get started. I've already set the depth of cut so that it bottoms out on my wasteboard down here. So that should be all set. It's going to be a little bit hard to see the pencil marking, and so that's why I used white for the sign. Roughing out the circle right now, and then I'll come back and clean it up after I get the center section removed. I'm actually cutting a 1/2 inch deep with a 1/4 inch diameter bit, and that's why the bit is streaming a little bit. That's deeper than you normally want to cut with a 1/4 inch diameter bit. You normally want to max out at a 1/4 inch deep. Okay, we're cut all the way through, so I'll remove this, and then I can go in and I can clean it up. Okay, I still have a little bit more to cut right in through here. Here's a close-up of the cut. I could actually do a little bit better job through here, but for this purpose, for this what this will be used for, this is close enough for me. So I'm going to transfer the letters onto the board, and then we'll continue. I've taken the Word document and printed it out on 11 by 17 paper, and then I've attached it to a walnut board just using some blue painter's tape. Underneath the sign I have white transfer paper, or it's white carbon paper, and I've started tracing the outline of the letters. For any of the straight sections, I'm using a metal ruler to make sure that those straight sections are drawn straight. I'll show you the current progress here. I've only done the first couple letters, but the white carbon paper seems to be working out really well. You can see there the has been transferred from the paper onto the board, and it should be easily seen when using the router. Okay, we're making progress now. Let's take a look. So you may be able to see that we now have the top line transferred onto the black walnut. I still need to transfer the bottom section, and unfortunately Microsoft Word has twisted these straight lines a little bit in the bottom letters, and so that's going to make it more difficult to transfer those onto the board and to later make it so that we can get straight cuts, but we can deal with that. Okay, I have the pattern transferred onto the board now. The next step is to take a sharp utility knife and the ruler and scribe all of the straight lines that are in the letters. That'll make it easier to make sure that those areas are cut straight. The wood should just peel away when the router is used in those sections, which should make it a lot easier to achieve straight lines. I've already done the T and the H letters in the word the. Okay, I have the board in front of me, and I've taken a razor knife and tried to trace all the straight lines. There's no straight lines down in here, so that's going to be problematic. Also, the outline that was produced by the transfer paper, the carbon paper, is just a little bit wider than I would have liked. But we'll try to make do with this. Now I need to set the router bit depth. So what I'll do is I'll bottom it out on the board. Okay, and then I'll set the stopper here, and then I'll turn this, and this should give me a 1/8 inch depth of cut. If I turn it again, that should give me a 1/4 inch depth of cut. I could use a setup block, but I don't have one here with me at the moment. So I'll go with a 1/4 inch deep, and it'll have a flat bottom. Once again, I'm using a 1/4 inch spiral bit. Okay, let's get started here. I'm hoping that I can see this. I can't really see the white, unfortunately, up in there. I may have to turn this sign around to do this top section. I'll work on the bottom section first. the router actually pulled me in. I believe that's due to the grain. So what I'll need to do then is make a gentle curve to pick that up, that little notch up there. Remove it. Got a little bit to do on this R. And it looks like a little bit more down in here. Okay, that seems to be working out real well. The bit is doing a lot more chattering than what I like. It doesn't seem to be affecting the quality of the cut, other than a little bit of extra vibration in it. So I'll spin this around and get started on this other section. My eyesight's not quite as good as what it used to be 30 years ago. But we'll see what we can do here. So here's the first section. I'm having trouble seeing the top of the T here, so I'm going to color that in with a pen. And hopefully I'll be able to see that a little bit easier. It looks like I missed the bottom of the T also. Here, and then also here. Looks like I got a little bit more to do on this eye right down here on the bottom. And maybe a little bit over on the side of the L. It's unfortunate that I can't see that when I'm down in the cut. A little bit there on the D also. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. It's not perfect. The router bit was chattering more and more as we went along. So here's what it looks like so far. What I'll do is I'll sand it down and cut it off, and I'll put on an edge on it, and then I'll put a layer of finish on top of it, and then I'll show you the results after that. Yeah, I decided to use a French traditional router bit to go around the edge of the board here. Okay, so there's the sign before any finish is applied to it. It for French traditional edge profile looks kind of nice. Okay, I'll bring you back as soon as I get a coat of finish on it. Here's the picture with the lights turned off so that there's no odd reflections. Okay, the first coat of finish has been applied to the sign. It's still quite wet from the finish. It won't be nearly shiny once it dries, I'm sure. But I'll give you a little bit of a closer view here. I think it turned out pretty nice. I didn't ruin a highly figured piece of walnut, even though it was looking that way as the bit was chattering so much. So this will be a satin finish once it dries. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. Bye!